Hello there, and welcome to the channel. Mad Mike here, and today we're going to go over something that I actually touched on a little bit in my video yesterday about Alita Battle Angel, and that is kind of my love-hate relationship with James Cameron films. And I'm just going to go over his major film installations, films in general. Just run through the filmography. Not very long, so it shouldn't take too long. But and then I'll go over kind of where I think there's a turnover in the films that he does from where I think his films were very original and well written and visually exciting to when the story element kind of took a back seat to the visuals. So let's start out. I think everybody knows who James Cameron is from his big budget movies for the most part, from stuff like Titanic and Avatar. And for people that are a bit more the old school crowd, you remember from Aliens and Terminator 2 and stuff like that, in the Abyss. So that's the encompassment of a lot of most of what his work is. But let's start at the beginning, because his first theatrical film that he ever directed was Piranha 2: The Spawning, which came out in 1982. Now, this was the sequel to Piranha, which was directed by another small-time film director at the time who became a very big name in the 80s, which was Joe Dante. And many people know him from Gremlins is probably his most famous film. And then you can also go to The Howling, the original one anyway, and then several other ones after that. But James Cameron directed the sequel, and the sequel actually also had Lance Henriksen in it, who became a longtime collaborator with Cameron, both in the 80s and beyond. So Piranha 2 set up a lot of things for James Cameron, and really that's where you see a lot of young directors get their start, is kind of in the B movie area, or the monster movies, or horror movies in general, stuff like that. Again, Joe Dante directed the original Piranha, and we can see that, and I don't believe the second one was, but the original I know was a production of Roger Corman, is a B movie king. So then we're going to move into his first big movie, which was Terminator from 1984. Now, everybody remembers the Terminator because of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton and why can't I remember his first name? His last name is Michael Biehn. And that was a movie where Cameron started to showcase what he does best, which is his visual storytelling. And we can see that with the special effects that were in the Terminator. I mean, just that skeleton, that chrome skeleton that's walking around in that movie near the end, after all the Terminator, after all the Arnold Schwarzenegger skin is burned off of him, and he's just walking around trying to kill Linda Hamilton, and and I believe it was a car manufacturer. No, it wasn't. It had a crusher in it. It was like a recycling facility or something. And it's amazing to look at, even though some of it, today you can look at this, you can kind of see some of the scenes, because you can see some of it was animation, claymation, and some of it was a bit different, but the practical effects are still amazing. And then you can see that again translated into his next movie, which was the sequel to Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien in 1986, titled Aliens, which of course we remember Sigourney Weaver, again Michael Biehn, who we had worked with on Terminator, and Lance Henriksen, again, who we had seen in Piranha 2, which I don't believe he was in Terminator at all, but I could be wrong about that. So now we move forward and we have Alien. So now we have even more of the practical effects, and in this movie you really can't even see the seams on those practical effects. The story is great. The story ups the ante. You have aliens everywhere. It takes it into more of an action franchise as opposed to a straight horror franchise. There's a lot of changes done between the original Alien in 1979 and Aliens in 1986. And you can see that just basically based on the directors. And you can say, in a way, also that Cameron kind of destroyed the sequels that were after, because they tried to go small again after Aliens, and that's not something you do after you go full on like the way that he did. So you have that, and I love all three of those movies. Piranha 2 is great, Terminator is great, Aliens is great, and then we go into the next one, which is 1989 with The Abyss. Now, The Abyss is kind of I don't want to say the black sheep of the early Cameron films, but it's kind of the one that's mulled over a lot. It doesn't get it gets mentioned, but it doesn't get mentioned as much as a lot of the other ones. And that may be because it's a little bit smaller than something like Aliens or Terminator 2, just in terms of spectacle. But it's still an amazing movie and still pushes those boundaries. And you can see kind of the threads of what he might use later on in Titanic, with this, because it does involve a lot of underwater stuff and a lot of sea things. So he got some of the experience for Titanic from The Abyss. And again, The Abyss, even though it was very successful, it was not on the same level as Terminator and Aliens and some of those other films. Which is why people, I think, glaze over it a little bit more because of the fame and the franchise attachment of those other movies. I still enjoy it though. The Abyss, I think, is still a very good movie, and it spawned a number of ripoffs. Some of them were made in the same year, like Deep Star 6 and Leviathan. But again, The Abyss kind of did it best out of that bunch, so that's why we kind of remember it over some of those other movies. And now we're going to go into what I consider to be one of the last films of what I would say is Cameron's golden age, from I'd say starting in 1984 with Terminator, and then you end in 1982. I mean, sorry, 1992 with Terminator 2. Now, Terminator 2 was one of those movies that everybody was anticipating it because people loved the Terminator and wondering what's going to happen. And now you finally have a follow-up to that movie 8 years later, and you get Arnold Schwarzenegger back as the Terminator, but he's not a bad Terminator anymore. He's a good Terminator. You have Eddie Furlong coming in as John Connor, which is the first on-screen depiction of that character. You have Linda Hamilton coming back as Sarah Connor again, and now she's a badass. And I can't remember the name of the guy that plays the T-1000. For some reason, his name is slipping my mind, but he does an amazing job as well. So you have all that, and the movie just comes together, and it feels like almost a finality film, because it's such a huge spectacle, and you get to see all this stuff. And the T-1000 is so much more menacing than the Arnold Terminator was, because it can change shape and it's harder to kill. It's not like an actual physical machine. It's almost like a living chrome, like mercury robot, and it is far more menacing than the old Arnold Terminator, even though it is less physically imposing in many ways. But that would be where I consider the end to it to be. He does have True Lies, but he does have True Lies, which comes up next, and True Lies is kind of one that kind of lies in the middle for me. I don't think it's necessarily a bad movie, but I wouldn't put it on the same level as his previous 4 films leading up to it. And again, it acts more or less like an action vehicle for Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not really anything overly special, at least I wouldn't feel that it is. It doesn't push a lot of things, except for maybe the Harrier stuff at the very end of it. It doesn't really push a lot of boundaries like a lot of his other films did. So that's kind of why I don't put that one that high up there, and I wouldn't really consider that necessarily part of his golden age of filmmaking. I would kind of consider that as it's a transitionary movie, because this is when he would go into movies that would make a buttload of money. However, but I feel from a story standpoint, they are sorely lacking. And we're going to go into the first one, which there's really only 2, but the first one is going to be Titanic. Now, Titanic, that movie was so big for so long. Everybody wanted to see it. Everybody had nothing but praise for it. Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, Billy Zane, which I think is the only thing of note that I can remember that Billy Zane was in besides the Phantom movie. But they had all these actors. They had those great actors in it, or what were touted as great actors. That catapulted Leonardo DiCaprio's career. for a large part of it. Because after that, he did movies like The Aviator, most recently The Revenant, Wolf of Wall Street, all that kind of stuff. And although most of those were involved with Martin Scorsese, so Titanic. It's one of those movies. Visually, it is stunning, especially the scene where the Titanic is going down at the end of the film, when it finally goes up on its end and sinks down into the water. But there are so many things that you could pick apart about Titanic, and one of the main ones is that Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, uh, they have a very cliched relationship. It is not written very well. I would compare it actually to Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor in terms of the way that the characters are written for each other. She says, "Oh, paint me like one of your French girls." It's like, no, that sounds so stupid. I mean, I get it in the context of the film, and it is kind of funny that he just alludes to like, "Oh no, I painted a hooker." She's no model or whatever. Which I thought was kind of funny, but most of it is just meaningless. And they do this scene where she's on the front of the Titanic and he's holding her and all that crap and that stuff. But I feel like the part of the thing in that movie that really makes it what it wound up being was the scenes of the Titanic sinking, was the actual disaster, and the actual the downward spiral of the movie is the romantic. Because here's the other thing, and this was pointed out. This has been pointed out in a bunch of circles, but I'm going to point it out again. At the beginning, I think if you take off the beginning of the movie, the points of it that happened, they were supposed to be present day 1996, I believe, was when it was being filmed, so it would have been 1996. If you took those moments out of it with the 90-something-year-old Rose, if you removed those, I think the movie would be a lot better because it would be more compartmentalized. And on top of that, it shows that she has that $100 million necklace the entire time. And then she throws it into the water afterwards, down to the wreck of the Titanic. So you just screwed all those marine biologists out of a fuck ton of money, which is insane. And then the other thing that you have to take into consideration, now I'm not sure if her family is supposed to be rich or whatever. I mean, you could make assumptions, but the necklace is worth a significant amount of money. And she's on the ship with what I believe is described as her great-granddaughter. So, now, spoiler alert for Titanic, even though it came out 22 years ago. Leonardo DiCaprio's character dies at the end of the movie, and Kate Winslet's character lives, which is why she's the old woman in the current day. But he dies. So that means that she survives, goes back to New York, gets married, has kids, those kids have kids, and then those kids have kids. So she now apparently has a very large family, and decides she's going to throw a necklace that is worth millions of dollars into the Atlantic Ocean for shits and giggles. So either you are incredibly rich or you are very senile, one or the other. And the other thing that kind of made me laugh was at the end of the movie, and again, this goes back into the idea that she had an entire family after the event of the Titanic, is it shows that she passes on, or whatever. It's supposed to be a symbolic moment where she dies on the boat and all that stuff. But then she goes to Titanic heaven, quote unquote, and she gets to hang out with Leonardo DiCaprio and all the people that died on the boat. Yeah, you had an entire family. And I'm pretty sure how old you are. Your husband's probably dead. And it wasn't Billy Zane, because they showed that Billy Zane hung himself. I believe they say that he hung himself after the stock market crashed in the late 20s. Or his character did. So she didn't get married to him. So instead of foregoing whoever the father of your children is, you're going to go hang out with Leonardo DiCaprio, a guy that you just had a few bang sessions with on a boat for 3 days. And again, it's just kind of pointing out that I don't think the romance in that movie is written very well. I don't think the story in general, aside from the actual voyage of the Titanic and the sinking, is written very well. But let's move past that. Let's move to Avatar, which is the big one. the one that everybody talks about. So Avatar came out in 2009. I have a personal vendetta against this movie because I lost $50 in a bet about this movie. But objectively, I still don't think it's a very good film because it is basically a remake of Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner from, I believe it was 1990, that won Best Picture, because it has the exact same plot. They simply change the setting and they change some of the dynamics in the story, because the whole idea of Dances with Wolves is Kevin Costner as a Civil War soldier who gets injured and gets brought back to health by these Native Americans, falls in love with a Native American girl, has to go through the whole proving himself by killing the buffalo and all that stuff. And then at the end of the movie, the Indians get slaughtered by the Civil War soldiers, or by the Union soldiers. So Avatar is the exact same plot line, except they switch up Native Americans for these blue alien things called Navi in the film. And they do the exact same thing where Sam Worthington, except instead of being injured, he's a cripple and he gets transferred into one of these alien bodies, and he's supposed to go infiltrate the aliens and figure out their weaknesses and stuff like that. And then the whole Sigourney Weaver is another character in it, and a few other people. But ultimately, it's the same story where he gets accepted into the tribe. He has to do the rite of passage, which is flying the giant bird thing or taming it. And then at the end, they have the fight. The only difference really is that the fight ends with the space aliens winning, whereas in Dances with Wolves, the Indians lose. Again, that's probably why you're able to have sequels now. But I felt that movie was a complete ripoff of that storyline in full, and I don't think the story was good at all. And that the movie mainly benefited because of the IMAX showings and because of the visual spectacle that was the film. Because you got to remember, $1.7 billion worth of this film's total gross came from overseas. 700 something million came from the United States, but 1.7 billion came from overseas. So this film was extremely popular in overseas markets. It was popular in the United States as well, but we've seen other movies break the domestic mark that movie set. I believe Avengers: Infinity War and Star Wars: The Force Awakens both cracked $1 billion for domestic gross. So domestically, it is not the highest grossing film in the United States. It is the highest grossing film worldwide because of foreign audiences. So, you can break that down any way you want, but whatever. Again, I don't really care much for that movie. And just to go back to it, the bet I actually lost on the movie was I saw the trailer for it. I thought it looked like it was going to be crap. And I bet a friend of mine $50 that Book of Eli with Denzel Washington would actually make more money than Avatar. And of course, I was wrong on that, even though I actually really do like Book of Eli. But back to what I was saying before. So that's kind of where the divide is in that mid-90s era, before Titanic but after Terminator 2, is when James Cameron kind of switched over into less of a storyteller and more of just almost like a visual effects artist, except he's taken more seriously than Michael Bay, because Michael Bay just puts weird statutory rape jokes in his movies. But here's the thing, is that I don't think James Cameron is going to be showing me anything I want to see anytime soon. Because really, the majority of the films that he has coming out that he's directing, and I'm not talking about Alita Battle Angel because he just wrote the screenplay and he's producing films he's directing, you have 4 Avatar sequels that are in the pipeline right now. 4 of them. He's filming 2 and 3 right now back to back, and he's supposed to be filming 4 and 5 back to back as well. I mean, I don't think they're going to do anywhere near as well as the first one did, unless you can somehow manage to get that audience from overseas again to watch those films, or if you can get the Chinese audience involved in it, which I don't know if they were involved in the 2009 original film. So there's a lot going on there. But it's not really something I want to see, because I didn't really like the first one. And I don't really know where he's going to go after the first one, because the aliens win, unless more people show up and try to kill them. which then you're just kind of left with the first movie's plot, except without the development at the beginning. Um, so again, it doesn't look like anything exciting to me, but I'm a fan of James Cameron. I'm just not a fan of James Cameron past 1994 ish. So that's just my feelings on it, and I know people disagree with me on that. I've talked to people who disagree with me on that vehemently. But what do you think? Put it in the comments. Put a like on the video, and make sure you hit the bell for notifications. And remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?